ख़वातीन और हज़रात, आज के हमारे सेलिब्रिटी कपल एपिसोड में प्रोफेसर यास्मीन सैकिया और उनके शौहर प्रोफेसर चार्ड हेन्स हैं, जो दोनों अमेरिका की एरिज़ोना स्टेट यूनिवर्सिटी में पढ़ाते हैं. Chad and Yasmin Apa are both co-directors of the Center of Muslim Experience in the US. Chad is Associate Professor of Religious Studies. He is a recognized scholar of modernity and Islam, Pakistan and South Asia, urbanism and belonging, as well as peace studies. His wife, Professor Yasmin Saikia, is a professor in the School of Historical, Philosophical and Religious Studies, Hart Nikachos Endowed Chair in Peace Studies. She's acting director, Center for the Study of Religion, as an associate professor, University of North Carolina, and assistant professor, Carleton College, Northfield, Minnesota. She has a long list of honors and awards, and I'll name a few. Recognized as the Rising Beyond the Ceiling, Global Research Fellow, International Achievement Recognition, etc., etc. Publications: Women, War and the Making of Bangladesh, Remembering 1971, Fragmented Memories, Struggling to be a Home in India, In the Meadows of Gold, Telling Tales of Swar Ghettos at the Crossroads of Assam. Assalamu alaikum, Yasmin Apa, and assalamu alaikum, Chad. If I may so address you, Yasmin Apa, because we know that you are a couple of years senior to me.
So 10 years.
Yes, and I want to sincerely thank you for your graciously accepting my invitation for this session, especially considering your demanding schedule. It truly is an honor to have you both in my program. So,
thank you for it's an honor to be here too.
तो अलीगढ़ के ताल्लुक से Chad is an honorary Alig, as Yasmin Apa and I both agree to this because of his long and continued association with AMU and his love for this institution. Yasmin Apa began her distinguished academic journey at AMU in 1980, graduated with first position honors in history in 1984, earning both the University Gold Medal and the Women's College Best Girl Award. In 1986, she completed her master's in history, again ranking first and receiving multiple prestigious recognitions: the University Gold Medal, Begum Nurul Hasan Memorial Gold Medal, Razmi Memorial Award, and a National Distinction for Academic Excellence. During her time at AMU, Yasmin Apa, also known as Sayeeda Yasmin to her AMU colleagues and peers, was a dynamic campus leader, actively participating in the literary and drama club at both Women's College and the university, as well as the debate club. She represented AMU in numerous national competitions, earning several accolades. Her leadership extended to serving as the vice president during 1982-83 and president of the Women's College Students Union in 1983-84, and as a senior hall of Abdullah Hall 1985-86. They both often visit Aligarh to present lectures, conduct research workshops, and work directly with students to support their research. So thank you again, Yasmin Apa and Chad, for making time to join me. If you may please allow my first question, and knowing that maybe you haven't spoken Urdu much in recent years, we'll do a mix of both Urdu and English. So Yasmin Apa, my first question: where did you spend your childhood, your schooling from AMU and then to US? And if it's not too personal, under what circumstances you married Chad? You're not audible to me. We missed a couple of words in the beginning.
Okay, I said, first of all, Mujib, thank you for inviting Chad and me to this very, very special occasion that you have created to connect Aligarians with one another and also help Aligarians to know others and others to know Aligarians. So, आपके जो program है कहकशां के सितारे, the galaxy, the stars in the galaxy. I don't know if people who come to this program like me are stars in the galaxy, but I do know one thing, that Aligarh produces stars no matter whether you are on the show or not, no shows at all. You are a star because you are an Aligarian. Okay, so I do want to say that first. Okay, that Alig is a community of stars because we have become really friends of one another. We have become human beings in a way in Aligarh. So that's what makes us special. And having said that, I say, how did I end up in Aligarh? Apne jo pucha mujhe.
जी
You know, I grew up in Assam. My parents are both professors. From a long line of actually academics. My grandfather, from my father's side, was also a math teacher. So we have, it was expected that we would continue education. But what had happened at the time when I was just finishing my class 10, that the Assam agitation had happened, and all the universities and schools closed down. And there was a reason now to go outside of Assam to study. But then other universities or institutions did not have a boarding or a residential arrangement for students for class 11, except Aligarh. And so that was one reason that Aligarh was the choice place. I did have family members who had studied in Aligarh before, so it is not completely foreign. So, but for us, when we arrived there in the 80s, it was a different world. Aligarh, people spoke Urdu, people wore shalwar kameez, people ate roti, and whereas we came from Assam, we were rice eaters, we wore pants and skirts, we went to convent schools, we spoke English, we had never heard a word of Urdu. So it was like a culture shock. But despite that kind of strangeness of arrival and being there as a PUC student, it was like fish in water. I just went in and I became part of it. So that was something extraordinarily special for me. There was something about Aligarh that embraced us, people like us, who actually, as I said, were like kind of strangers. We were embraced by the people. We were embraced by the provost office, the seniors, through ragging, through other kinds of ways that Aligarh sort of creates those relationships. And so I never thought I would ever leave Aligarh. I had become so attached to Aligarh that I thought I was going to go back and do my PhD there after I finished. And my mother said, no more, you will take the IS exam. And I said, absolutely not. I'm going to be an academic. Okay, I don't want to be an IS. So what do you do? I said, I'm then going abroad to study. And my parents, who were, also very educated people, they encouraged. And so that's how I ended up in the US. And I started again an MA program because at Aligarh, I had a class 11. And in BA and MA, I had not completed 16 years of studies to get into the master's program. So I had to do a master's again. And it was during the master's program at Madison, Wisconsin, that I met Chad Haines, who was my graduate school friend, in a seminar that we took on South Asia on nationalism.
Wow. Wow.
We actually had issues with that class, so we actually sat around and complained about the class a lot. And so it was taught by a very senior historian of South Asia, and so we sort of connected around our negative feelings, I guess, about that. But it was quite sort of unique marriage in a sense. Intercultural marriages are always sort of have those challenges. But I ended up actually going to India in 1994, December. That was my first trip to actually Aligarh in December of 1994. And then we got engaged. And then a year later, we got married in Assam. And actually, I had the unique opportunity because we were both then working on our dissertations for our PhDs. And so I actually spent a year in Assam while Yasmin was doing her research. So for me, it was quite a unique sort of experience, an opportunity to live in India for an entire year, live with her family, get to know them, and have that really sort of personal relationship that you don't often get in these kind of international marriages. So
right. Perfectly Bollywood movie script.
Don't
know that.
No song and dances in Assam.
And I believe, I haven't been to Assam, but I'm sure that this must have been. It's a very scenic state, I believe.
It's a beautiful state.
Yeah.
And what struck Chad when he used to be first there, he used to tell me that people look so different from rest of India. There's such a variety of people here. And that the connections between maybe Southeast Asia, even East Asia, and then India, South Asia, all come together. It's like a melting pot that way. Besides the natural beauty, there's a diversity of people
Exactly.
that most people in India do not know about or interact with. Yeah. But
Absolutely.
Aligarh was certainly very different for me.
Yeah.
But as I said, the difference was not anything to be to create distance. The difference actually became an intimate space of knowledge and friendships and people. And it's something that I will never ever forget. Aligarh is a place I will never forget.
Absolutely, Yasmin Apa, this has been the beauty ever since Aligarh's inception. This has been the beauty because right from the stage when Sir Syed Ahmad Khan must have founded this madrasa or a college, and then he lured or rather invited people from all over India. And I remember that while I was a student, there were a lot of foreign students as well, and they used to gel with the local mahal and local traditions and customs as well, and they also remember. I have interviewed in my program. I have interviewed a couple of people from Africa and from other parts of the world, and they still fondly remember their days at AMU. So now,
But
so
as
now
you said, they blended into the Mahal. This is
yes,
something very, I think, important. At Abdullah Hall, we had students from Somalia, Iraq, Iran, Palestine,
yes,
Syria.
yeah,
None of us thought that, okay, the designation was that they were foreigners,
yeah,
but there was nothing. There was never this thing that, oh, these are foreigners, just something other than us. It
yes,
was like they were part, they ate together. It was just that ability to sort of take people in and make them part of you,
right,
and yet be able to sort of enjoy the presence of the other
yeah.
is unique in Abdullah Hall. I don't know about the other boys' halls, but Abdullah Hall was very
It's the
unique in
same. It's
this.
the same. It's the same. Or even though the most of the male foreign students, they don't prefer staying in the hostels. They do. They rent apartments but still, while in the university, they are very much integrated. At least when I was a student. Now I don't see as many students as they were during our time. For some reason, I think maybe lots of other possibilities have come up, so they don't come to. And interestingly, Yasmin Abad, Aligarh wasn't an interesting city at all. Uh,
You tell me that. Our biggest entertainment was going to Softy, to have in Maris Road, to have a
Nice.
Softy ice cream.
Absolutely, absolutely. And see, I have lived here for quite a few years as a bachelor. So we had lots of bachelors staying together, and we used to talk about a lot about Aligarh and about Shamshad Market, for example. So first time when some of my friends they visited me in Aligarh, and when the kind of impression they had in their mind about Shamshad Market, and they when they were actually there and they saw it, it was a shock to them.
You guys are pining for this place. This is the place that you keep talking about.
Absolutely.
But just like I believe Naima Apa was telling me recently that another of our seniors, Naima Apa, who's now the VC of AMU,
Ji,
she was my senior at Aligarh, right, at Abdullah Hall.
ji.
So when I met her this time, she said that another friend of hers, who Farhad Appa actually, who brought her daughter from Canada. They live in Canada. And she had taken her daughter to Abdullah Hall to show her Abdullah Hall. And she said, Mama, this is the place that you talk about so much.
Exactly.
This place. What is so? She was like,
Exactly.
what is this place that you're talking
I mean,
about?
I believe Yasmina, but I mean, these are certain things which are beyond words to explain. I think these are certain things which have to be felt, and not everybody has the expression which can explain those years and those feelings while we were the students over there. So now
But
we
it
will,
is continuous.
yeah,
Yeah, this is what Chad and I keep talking, because we keep going back, right?
yeah,
That this is a continuous thing. Even students now feel that in a different way from us, or the people who came before us. They've probably felt different. But that connection, that love, as I say, Aligarh mein, Sir Syed's ruh is still there.
it's
He
still there.
gets you and he intoxicates you.
Absolutely.
And you cannot forget this, that level of intoxication.
True.
But सबको नहीं पकड़ते हैं वो. He just takes a few people and then he वो कब्जे में ले लेते हैं.
And you are
And you
certainly one.
cannot
You
get
are
out.
certainly one of them. I'm very
I am
sure.
one of them. I am a Sir Syed fan. I am a complete. I am Ashik of Sir Syed's ideas. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we move on to our questions now. This one is for both of you. Since you have both studied South Asian history, Muslim experiences and peace studies in depth. So how do you see the link between what actually happened in history and the stories people tell today, especially now when history is being reinterpreted or changed in many ways, especially in our region?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, and it's a challenging question of even how you sort of address history and understanding history to our students, right? And how you teach it. But I think one of the things that we've sort of discovered, what we focus on in our sort of our work, and particularly in our peace studies work, is that there's certain constants throughout, regardless of the social movement of the time that rewrites history. They come and go. Right? This year it's this, and a few years later there'll be another movement moving in a different direction. They'll try to rewrite history in their sort of frame. So the writing of history is constantly shifting, but the historical processes are the continuity. But that continuity lies, if you will, with the people and their actions and behaviors and the ways in which they live their lives, right? That's the reality. So how do you move beyond the discourses, if you will, the ways in which we talk about the past, to actually understanding the past as a lived reality, right? And I think that's, again, I mean, just going back to what we were saying about, Aligarh, it's a lived reality, but it's also this history that's continued, right? And so it has this constant sort of power to it, right? And this that people then carry forward. And that's what we try to uncover, right? In these other spaces, in these other places, in the ways in which people themselves and their diversity, right? Their cultures and their religions and their own sense of traditions, etc. What is it about those that give them the strength, in a sense, to move forward? How do they navigate the realities of their everyday lives, right? And make sense of it and create meaning.
But Chad,
So
how?
I will add to it, Mujib, in a more personal way, since I, have been trained in Aligarh in history, and then I continued studying history, and now I teach history, but also I work history from now many different multiple kind of sites. I just don't do what I was taught, like text and archives. I go to people, right? And I listen to people's story a lot. And I take each anecdote not as just a story, but actually a telling of history by a person who represents a collective emotion, right? And I'll tell you one story. I can tell you many stories, but there is one that has struck me when I first started teaching at Carleton College. I met Kuldeep Nayyar. And Kuldeep Nayyar, who is now passed on, told me about how his family had to migrate in 1947.
Right.
And he was an adult. He was 18 years old. He was already 18, 19 years old. He was going to college at that time.
Yes.
And so he had very distinct memories of the whole process. But he also remembered very fondly that his parents remembered Lahore and the places that they lived in very, 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 with a very benign and a very intimate way of thinking about the place. Although they left, they had to leave. There was no rancor. Right. And so when he went back once on a delegation from India, his mother asked him to take some sweets and put it on a grave that was in the compound of the house in which they lived. Okay.
Yes.
And every Thursday, I believe the mother used to put sweets on the grave. They don't know whose grave it is. A person was buried in that compound. And every Thursday, the mother used to put sweet. And so she told Kuldeep that please take some sweets and put it there. And he did it, right? This was after 47, 97 or 99, 50 years later nearly. And he went and put the thing and he said, it was such a nice feeling. I was like coming back home, that this person rested here and I was also coming back. And we have heard this story not from one person, I can tell you. We have heard similar stories over and over again from people, including taxi drivers who take us across to the boat. They say, can you grate us sweets from Lahore? And we're like, why? Oh no, wahan ke sweets, they're very sweet. They remember something, which is of memory, of sweetness, of friend, of connections. That history today, that generation is dying. And there's
Yes.
nobody to tell that story. So
Yes.
how do we bring that story back is, I think, one of the projects history must take on. Because now the new generation, the way they're interacting with people across any side of our border, of India's, or any side, whichever side it is through either entertainment, films, like as you
Yes.
said, Bollywood, or it could be sports, or it is music, or maybe social media, I don't know. But they are not having these human interactions to feel the place, the people, to feel the emotions of the others. History must convey that. But today, as you're saying, history is being revised for a particular kind of reason at the moment, which provides a new challenge. That this history is not to combat it, not to challenge it in a negative way, but we're able to pull the human story and say, yes, we have countries, yes, we have borders, and yes, we have nation states, but we also have people, and let the people continue to feel the well-being of their neighbors. We are just neighborly countries. Can we see each other as neighbors and remember each other's neighbors? Because only when neighbors help one another, then we become strong, right? You depend on your neighbors in Kuwait. We depend on our neighbors here where we live. So we need to be a little more aware of these human stories
Well,
and be able to
Yasmin
tell
Apa,
them a
I'm
little.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I
No,
believe that
sorry.
history is now, I think it's catering political agendas, because you see the history which I studied in school, it was entirely different than the ones my children are studying. The characters are being redefined. So now, how do we judiciously approach and strike a balance between what's wrong and what's right? I mean, is there a way to strike a balance between these two narratives?
With you have to look at it as multiple narratives. They're not just binary narratives, they're multiple, right? So if you go to, as you said, your children's textbook, the revisions that are taking place politically, the place names have changed, right? Aligarh's name may change one day. It may not be Aligarh anymore. The place name changed. Sacred spaces are being under attack, right? People were just worshiping there, whoever they were, they're worshiping. There is a way of division. I, as a historian, have decided that I am not going to over-focus on this present moment of crisis, because politics comes, politics goes. The human is the sustaining reality of this earth. The human must sustain, and the human must create sustainable societies. As a historian, my role, I may be at a margin today, but I'll continue to give that voice to that marginal who talks about human relationship that transcends the politics of hatred and creates friendship, and precisely creates friendship with the people who you're taught to hate. You have to be friends with people that you're taught to hate. That's when you become truly human. And history story, the big history, right? Capital history, which i.e., in a way one can say is the truth of our lives. The truth is we are human, and we must continue that human journey. So that's the history I write, and that's why my history has taken a shift towards peace work, peace studies. So I do peace history. Right?
That's
People
interesting.
may do histories of division. I do history of peace.
Right.
But I think
Right.
if I can add, Mujib, because here in the United States, I mean, when I was growing up, when I was in school, our textbooks never talked about the genocide against Native Americans. Slavery was seen as a positive thing, the ways in which blacks were uplifted out of Africa and brought to the US and given opportunities, etc. So they were lies, right?
Yes.
So history always plays that history that you're talking, textbook history is
Yes.
always defined by politics, right? Then it was an American nationalism. Over the years since then, we've rewritten history. We rediscovered those pasts. We recognize the genocide. We recognize what slavery was really about. We brought that into our textbooks. Now there's a movement to take that out again and go back to that whitewashed history of the past.
And
But
that's
there's
sad.
another history.
Yes.
Yeah, in a sense, not the history with that capital H that you get in the classroom that you get in the textbook, but what we're talking about is that people's history, in a sense, history with a small h, right? The history that's lived, that's the reality. Yes, we have to go through that textbook class to sort of get beyond, but we have a responsibility to look at the other narratives, to teach our kids, our children something else.
Yes.
And that's to take them out of the classroom, right? And give them those experiences. And that's when you start to actually appreciate and understand the reality and the depth of history that we're living in. Right?
But you have to be in an environment that allows you to do that, right?
Exactly.
And that I think,
Yeah,
and
so
I
it's-
will definitely say, the United States of America still, even now, is very is a space where you can do this kind of work. You can, okay. I'm not 100% certain whether India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, you can actually do this kind of work, like what Chad is saying, questioning the narrative, inserting a new thing, standing up against the falsehood. Here, you are not arrested for that, right? But in those places, you could be arrested. So there is also how much does a historian risk his or her life, the lives of his family, his or her families, for the pursuit of this truth that we're talking about. So you have to be in a space. So that way I do appreciate that I'm able to do this kind of history because I'm a professor in the United States.
Right.
I have to say.
Agreed.
And I deeply appreciate the freedom of the intellectual mind that is here still, hopefully, and we will not lose it.
Inshallah. So, Yasmin Apa, your research and teaching have often highlighted the roles of women in shaping history, particularly in conflict settings. So, please share some insights on how women's experiences during wars like the 1971 war or the ongoing global wars have influenced your understanding of historical memory and healing.
This is a very interesting question for me and a very deeply important question for me, again, both from the issue of, as you had said, the epistemology of history. What kind of histories do you write, right? And that epistemology of history, the knowledge creation of history is deeply connected with human beings, the ontological aspect of it. Who are we? What is my being, right? And so women as beings in history have never been taken very, very seriously. Okay, they have been looked at as some kind of passive recipients on whom history is worked on. And this in post-conflict zone, in writing this book on 1971, I realized and learned from the women who were treated as victims of history and victims of the might of nationalism that they are preservers of memory. Okay, and this memory is not simply memory of some hatred or memory of there's a lot of memory of pain and loss, but not of hatred, not animosity. It was deeply memories of compassion and of trying to create a wholesomeness within yourself, right? In order so that you can become wholesome in the world and the world becomes wholesome to you. Right. So to give you a very concrete example, let me talk about something which is a taboo subject in South Asia, which is sexual violence in war. Okay. And most of my interviewed women were of survivors of sexual violence. And they had never been able to talk about this because there's no space in a community like ours in South Asia that even has a word for. Like Urdu does not even have a term for rape, right? Whereas Bangla has a term for rape, like we call it zulm. So they will use the word zulm, oppression, right? But when you are oppressed and your body has been oppressed, what is left in you is your mind. Yeah. And the mind refuses to concede to this oppression. And yet the women, by refusing that, by creating a sense of wholesomeness that my mind cannot be penetrated and destroyed, have created a new narrative of history, which is a narrative of compassion. National history does not write that story.
Yes.
Till I came around and wrote that book, nobody had done this kind of work. People actually thought I was crazy trying to record these women's story. And where will I get it? And how will I put this forward? And I, mashallah, was able to do it because they gave me the story. This was a gift that women gave me. That if you listen to us, you will hear a different narrative. And truly so, that narrative was so different that it became a site for peacemaking, for healing, for reconciliation, for bringing people together. The women's stories pushed me to go study perpetrators. And I sort of brought perpetrators into the story to understand how men feel about doing violence. Okay. And men told me very similar stories. After they tell you all about the brave war, duty of war, I did this, I did that, I fought this in this combat operation, I did this guerrilla thing, I did, they talk first all about the bravery, then they come back and they sit and they say, but we lost something. We lost our humanity. And can you write a history, a story of trying to patch this humanity together? And that's what the book became. These human stories that talk about across these borders, across these divides, to sort of show that there is a resilient human story still there. And if one only listens to it, one will find that there is hope. So women did give me in this narrative the capacity to the hope that despite violence, despite destruction, humans can rise from the ashes. And this human is a stronger human because it does not concede anymore to the lies that are fed to them. So women as preservers of memory, listening to women, and they're not talking about these in some big forum or something. These stories, they're conveying it sometimes to their children while they're cooking or while they're doing some work or something, or they're talking among themselves. So it's not some grand posturing of history. But if you go and collect and tell their story, you suddenly become, I as a historian became embarrassed that we had never really taken women's voices seriously, and that women can produce different narratives that can humanize us, dignify us, and make us better. So let us listen to those stories. In fact, this book is probably of all the work that I have done, has become the most popular book I have ever written, because it humanizes. People like to know that we are capable of being good despite the horrible things we do to one another.
Exactly.
And women become the Zaria. They are the channel through which we know. So healing is reconciliation, and healing is possible when you listen to marginal voices, whether women or not women.
Yes, and I was wondering, Yasmin Apa, the other day I was reading an article about the similar atrocities which were committed in the Bosnian War. And if I correctly remember the article, it said that UN acknowledges at least 100,000 women, they were subjected to this heinous crime of rape. And now the history seems to have been forgotten. Nobody talks about them, and this should be a part of the healing process, that these things should be spoken about, written about, and the new generations, they must come across these stories so that if there is another war, these kind of things, these kind of happenings can supposedly be prevented. So we will move on to next question. Yasmin Apa, you have worked in a variety of international academic settings, from University of Melbourne to Malaysia and Egypt. How have these diverse cultural and academic environments shaped your research, especially when exploring topics like Muslim minorities in liberal democracies? I know it's a difficult question, but it's so relevant and so applicable,
Oh, it's a very, very good question, actually. And it also lets me sort of connect the personal experiences with the larger historical and kind of present questions that we're working on democracy. Malaysia, let me start with Malaysia, because Malaysia is very similar to India as a parliamentary democracy. They elect their own people. But Malaysia also has a very plural society. There are Muslims, there are Hindus, there are Christians. There are different kinds of ethnicities in Malaysia, Malay, Chinese, Thai, all kinds of people. Malaysia had one of the approaches in Malaysia that we saw was wasatiyah. They had really developed this concept of wasatiyah, the middle path, right? And they were using it in all kinds of public discussion, academic forum, including on political discussion about wasatiyah. Mm-hmm. So that is one thing they have been contributing, and I'll come back to it a little more later. You asked about Cairo. Cairo was a very different experience, and Chad can tell you more about Cairo than I do, because I spent 1 year. Chad lived there for 4.5 years. But as a woman, I found Cairo's although it was at that time Mubarak was the president of the country and he was a military guy. Although it was authoritarian, there were spaces of democratic kind of possibilities. People would get together and talk, and there were all kinds of opportunities. But there was also a gender problem that I saw there more than a political kind of clamping down. Okay, during that time, it's very patriarchal, unlike in Malaysia or India that way, okay? Highly patriarchal, so women's spaces were very limited, and I think women carried a lot of pain in them. I still remember the shrine of Sayeeda Zainab, and women would go to Sayeeda Zainab's shrine. Women were Muslims or Coptic Christians, and that became a common space for where women used to go and offload their anguish. So this is something I noticed, that religion played a very different role in
But
Cairo.
this is in Egypt or this is in Syria?
In Egypt.
In Egypt, okay.
Egypt, huh? And then there's also Sayyida Zainab in Damascus. That's another one. This is another shrine. So people, like we found that, like in Kashmir, there is the shrine of Abdul Qadir Jilani, right? He's not there, but there's a shrine. So I don't know whether the person is buried there or not, but they carry the memory and they create a space, and then they say, this is our women's space in which we sort of gather, right? In Australia, is very, very different from, say, the United States when it comes to that. Liberal democracy is very different. In the United States, as we're saying, that you can hear from us, that there is a very dynamic Muslim voice here that is emerging and also maturing and able to sort of navigate in a very difficult situation of security and surveillance and all of that. But they're not, they're not pushing back. In Australia, Muslims are there, but it's not so prominent. There in the Catholic University, there was a lot of interfaith kind of work going on, and there were a lot of scholars who study Islam in Melbourne in the Catholic University, and there was really an intellectual development happening there. But otherwise, you do not see a great presence of Muslim communities very obviously, right? Like you don't hear the azan. Whereas say where we live in Phoenix, our university, we have a mosque, which was the older mosque before the university. So there we have the azan 5 times a day, and it's given a loudspeaker. Okay, so it's in a democracy, as you're talking, liberal democracy, where we are all supposed to be equal, right? Equal citizen. Each individual is invested with the right of equality, right of liberty, right of freedom, right to vote, all of that. In different places, you see it working a little differently. And I think India, as you know, is very plural. Things are changing a little, but still there's a plurality there.
True.
That is worth paying attention to.
Yep.
And reinforcing that. But two things I will say about Muslims in all these different places in these liberal democracies having very different kinds of interaction with the state. One is that Muslims really believe in a democratic process. They want democracy, whether it was in Egypt, whether it is in Malaysia, they have maintained it. In India, we know Muslims will want democracy. Democracy is important, although the West wants to make it look like the Muslims do not want democracy. It is not true. Muslims want democracy. Muslims want to go and elect the leaders. They want to have a say in governance and all of that. And second is human rights. I've seen this a lot, that Muslims have a deep sense of rights. And I think that comes from the concept of hukuk al-ibad, right? That people have rights and responsibilities. So justice can happen only when you can exercise your right and you can let others exercise their right. And I have seen that in Muslims, among Muslims, like as I said, the Sayeeda Zainab area, where Muslims embrace Coptic Christians to come and sit there and do. They allow them the right to share that space. So in small ways and big ways, you can actually see that Muslims living as either majority or minority in liberal democracies can have something positive if we pay attention to the good part of what they're doing, like wasatiyah. Right? Plurality, middle path, human rights. There are also multiple challenges that Muslims
So, Yasmin Apa,
encounter.
you mean to say that you are optimistic about Muslim diaspora, Muslim masses having a say in these liberal democracies in future?
Can I
Yes,
jump
please,
in?
Chad should jump
I mean, two things to come to your question, but let me go back to something Yasmin was saying earlier. That in many ways, the spaces, and particularly now, if we shift in a sense to the diasporic communities, the Muslim communities, and particularly in the West, in Europe, and the United States, North America, the two things we find that one is the ways in which Muslims are organizing. There are a lot of very informal ways in which Muslims are coming together, working, finding a place for themselves in the sites in which they reside. And it goes beyond just the mosques and the spaces that they build for the religion, but it's the community spaces, it's the schools, but it's also what's happening in their homes. Last night, we ourselves just went to a gathering of Maulid in a home, right? And so these are the places in which actually community is transpiring, in which community is being built and created, and those encounters and exchanges of coming together. But I want to emphasize that it's these informal places, as Yasmin was telling this story with Sayeeda Zainab in Cairo, right? There's a gathering, there's a ritual taking place, but there's so much going on that it's actually an informal space in which people are coming together, encountering one another. Women are finding empowerment in that place, right? It's not formal, there's not a legal structure, because the culture itself is actually quite oppressive towards women. But there's places in which they find strength, right? And so it's that informality that's extremely important. And so in that way, and again, every country in Europe is different. What's happening in Sweden, what's happening in the UK, what's happening in Italy and Greece are radically different. Okay? And the processes and the politics of each of these countries, and including the United States. So it's hard to sort of create a blanket kind of generalization about what's happening. But in each one, and we've spent a lot of time in Europe actually in the last decade traveling there and meeting both colleagues in the academic setting, but also communities and the Muslims themselves. And it is empowering actually to sort of see, yes, they struggle a lot, but the ways in which they're creating a presence, right? And we see that particularly in the United States. After 2001 and the terrorist attacks in New York and DC, etc., there was a closing off. There was almost a ghettoization. There was fear within the Muslim community.
Sure.
There's extensive policing and surveillance, etc. But from about 2010, thereabouts, there's been a radical change. In the last 15 years, there's been, if you will, a renaissance, a reawakening of the Muslim community of saying, hold on, we belong here and we are American, right? And one is coming of age, the second generation now are in college or now going out and finding jobs, etc. But it's also the community itself. The recent immigrants are saying are coming here with a strength. And again, organizing. There's so many associations, so many NGOs, so many organizations, cultural, political, social, feeding the hungry, taking care of our cultural rights and, having cultural days, religious, across the diversity. But one of the fascinating things, and particularly here in the United States compared to anywhere else, is the diversity of Muslims. And that's what's so empowering, that it is our diversity that in fact gives us the strength here, that we're not ghettoized around a particular sort of community. We're not stuck like Little Italy or Chinatown in New York City or San Francisco, where you could go to Chinatown and there's still people who don't even speak English. Right? They've grown up with Chinese, they only know Chinese. It's still a ghetto, if you will, an ethnic ghetto. But we don't have that with the Muslims because we're so diverse and we have to interact with one another. And that gives us a particular strength here. So yes, so I'm particularly hopeful of the ways in which Muslims are, in a sense, asserting themselves, creating a narrative about who we are and our future.
Yes.
I'm very hopeful. If you ask me the same question, I'm very hopeful, Mujib, because as Chad said, that diversity is our strength. But also I'm finding that people are now actually engaging with the Quran and, with religion in a more personal way. They try to understand what they're reading. And if this book is telling you to live well with others, to be plural, to be tolerant, to be just, the young people are actually living by those rules.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
if you bring those kind of values and you live by, you will be a community that others will respect, right? It'll take
Yes.
a little time, maybe 5-10 years, but sooner or later, our young people will become our ambassadors to say, this is what a Muslim person is. This is how Islam teaches
Interestingly,
me.
Yasmin Apa, I do endorse your viewpoint, both of yours. Interestingly, most of the interpretations and a very rational approach towards understanding the religious text is coming from the West. You have some
Yeah.
real good scholars who are reaching out the younger generations, because the younger generation is looking forward to more rational explanation of the religious text rather than the conventional madrasa type of explanations of the Quran and the Hadith. And it's very encouraging to see the hijab being in the walking in Central Park or in Manhattan or in any of the US cities, or even in some remote parts of Europe. So yeah, as you say, it seems encouraging, and let's hope that the prejudices are they are really able to overcome these prejudices. So
If I can just tie that back, just quickly tie this back to what we're talking about, in a sense, Aligarh too. I mean,
yeah,
this is Sir Syed's mission, right?
yes,
There's tradition, right? We have that and we're embedded in that. It gives us strength, but we shouldn't be enclosed by it and trapped by it and snared by it, right? We also have, in a sense, modernity. We have these dynamic, changing sort of things to bridge those and bring those together. And I think that's part of Sir Syed's sort of mission and vision
absolutely.
that carry forward,
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely, absolutely. So, Yasmin Apa, now let's talk about the book you have written, The Women and Peace in Islamic World, Chapter 10, Strangers, Friends and Peace, The Women's World of Abdullah Hall. So we come back to Aligarh.
Yeah.
It always comes back to Aligarh. Everything comes back to Aligarh.
And it's so encouraging to see Chad being so supportive about this.
He knows that there will be no peace in the house.
I've been well indoctrinated into.
Yes,
He
yes.
says a word against Aligarh, the armor will come out.
Yes. So you talk about how friendships between women from different backgrounds helped create a peaceful environment. So how does this everyday kind of peace built on shared experiences and friendships challenge common ideas about Muslim women in South Asia?
Another very, very good question, very penetrating question, I think, and deeply, I think, reflective. As we know, means who in the world would have thought that there would be a women's college and a hall exclusively made for women nearly 100 years ago for Muslim women, right? And people have not really paid attention that Muslim women actually are, not these cloistered, unknown, illiterate people, but highly educated, highly accomplished luminaries in their different fields that particularly Abdullah Hall has produced and Women's College has produced. AMU. For us, AMU is Abdullah Hall in many ways, right? People
Yes,
like us who
yes,
live
yes.
inside that hall for all entire time of our staying in AMU. The way Abdullah Hall functioned, as I wrote in this chapter 2, is something that is a microcosm of the pluralism of India. In some way, one can think. It is also a microcosm of what humanity can be and should be, right? It has this whole spectrum that you start here and you can end here. It doesn't give you a path. It doesn't tell you that this is like a lesson plan, that you will go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. Rather, it is in a living condition that it creates, opens up doors after doors, like it lifting a veil every time. And as you start off, you get a little more mature, you can understand the next step, and you can understand why you're doing what you're doing the next step. So I found that that I paid attention to, the story of friendship. Friendship there was never really actually articulated. Like you never sat around and said, let's write a book on dosti, and let's write a convivability or something, or even pluralism. rather you lived it, right? So it took me a while to capture that Abdullah Hall's lived world is history by itself. How do you now write it, give it put it in words and vocalize it, right?
Correct.
Because it's so organic. It's absolutely organic. But what I saw when I reflected on it, that Abdullah Hall, in very systematic way, without pronouncing itself, created all these opportunities. One was of educational advancement, right? Like, as I said, no other university had a residential arrangement for students from kindergarten all the way to PhD, even for girls, right? I could enter class 11. The younger ones went to the smaller. I started in Wahidia Hostel, right? And so there was that initial advancement that you will be given educational advancement if you come here. And this is one thing that most people don't think that that Muslim women are engaging in, educational advancement. Abdullah is the living reality of that, right? Inside Abdullah, you would find, I found that what governance, this whole idea of civic responsibility, of democracy that you're talking about in the larger landscape is actually developed right there. Like we were talking about this women's college union, senior hall, all these functions that we do, right? All these little tasks that we are taught from the beginning, or cultural secretary, literary secretary, this, that, actually gives you a sense of civic responsibility and governance. You know, how to become your own agents to run this thing. No provosts or wardens controlled all of this. You elected yourself, you sat yourself, you decided, you bargained with the administration, whatever, and you actually did something, right? In my time, there was a huge question about remission for boarders who had to leave campus because of university being closed down, and people were expected to pay the fees. And many people came from poorer families and the parents could not afford it. And so I took up the cause and I said, no, these students cannot pay their border fees when universities close. And so we bargained. So we learned political bargaining and to learn with speak at the same time, adab, right? You're not shouting and protesting and you're not making a big ruckus. You're talking about it and dialoguing. And they did give the space. They wanted to see how much we will be able to advocate for ourselves. So it does teach you the civic responsibility and governance, creating networks. Now, in that, it is not competitive. There is competition, right? You contest, but it is done in a very friendly manner. It is not aggressive. It is very friendly. That's another thing I learned, that politics can still be respectful. You can be different, but you can still be respectful. Abdullah Hall Women's College really had that in my time very distinctly. Another thing that I will tell you that Abdullah Hall did was across religious boundaries and sectarian boundaries, they brought people together. I remember one of the first rituals that we had was, we were told that you're talking of anecdotes and things if you want to know. We were told that we will be given khichura on the day of Ashura. We had never in Assam ever had khichura. And we didn't know what this was, right? And so we were told that you bring your thing and and they gave us something in a bowl that looked like dal to us. Okay. And we were like, what is this? Is this dinner? This dal? So what, there's nothing else to eat with it? But we realized that was Ashura. In my mother's house also, we used to keep Ashura. So, it was a little different. So at Aligarh, the Shia students were never made to feel like they're outsiders. Ashura was fully maintained. We went for Matam. We used to go for Matam and all of that. And so that was very good. The Sunnis, all of us, we used to have maulids, we used to organize. So also there was a religious part of it, but nobody actually monitored, supervised, or imposed on anyone. You did your namaz, you did not do your namaz. This was another wonderful thing that I learned, that religion is not an imposition. Religion is something that should come from within you, and you can share it and you can do it irrespective of it. There were Hindu students with us. There were Christians. We celebrated Christmas. We celebrated Holi, Diwali. There'll be dinners for all of those occasions. Aligarh taught you that religion is not a place for division, particularly Abdullah Hall. Religion is a place for you to enjoy one another's differences.
Correct.
Right? So multiple levels, education, religion, civic responsibility, and across classes, right? To know what the bhais and the bibis are going through, the people who worked for us, how to the dhobi, the chanawala, bittan bhai, all of those people, it is It was a world that I'm not being just nostalgic, I'm talking about it as
A
academic.
reality.
I think it is a world that teaches you how to be a really wholesome person in a multiplicity of different peoples and culture. Stand your ground of who you are and what you are, and at the same time respect and imbibe as much as you can
Yes.
the presence of the other. You don't have to become like them, but respect their presence and learn to respect the difference. So this is my really my Aligarh Abdullah's lessons that I have taken with me to the US. And I bring it back again to India. And as I told you in the beginning, I keep writing that kind of history because that's what I learned in Aligarh. Not as a history lesson, but as a living lesson. How do you live? And that's become my history now. It's completely an Abdullah training.
Yeah.
It's not, it doesn't come from any textbooks. It's an Abdullah recalling what Abdullah taught me and how to now implement it in my own work.
It's a very interesting chapter, and I have gone through that chapter, and I would really prescribe to almost everybody, to everybody rather, watching this program to go through this particularly this your whole book must be interesting as well, but this chapter particularly is very interesting. So I really hope that this program serves kind of an advertisement for this book to be read widely by especially the Aligharians and the women associated with their past and nostalgic about being Aligharians. So yeah, now let's talk about your passion, your project, which you are very emotionally associated with, the Sir Syed Digital Legacy Project, which highlights Muslim contributions to global civilizations. And so, how do you see this effort helping to challenge stereotypes and inspire future generations? Do you think it can help reduce prejudices, especially in the places like the US and in India, or rather say subcontinent?
I, Inshallah, we can say. But no, the Sir Syed Memorial Fund is really designed to bring forward his mission that we were just talking about, right? Of this history of people and who we are. And it's our responsibility to tell our story, to rewrite, in a sense, that what we were talking about earlier, that history with a capital H. They're going to tell a story about us, right? But where's our story in this? And how do we tell our story? And how do we project our story? And how do we get it out there? And what is it that we want to tell? What do we want others to understand or know about us? That's our responsibility, right? And it's only when there are alternative stories out there and being circulated can their perspectives change, right? Islamophobia is a reality.
True.
There's a lot of negative perspectives towards Muslims. That's generated by dominant stories that are in the news and the media. But it's our responsibility now to start changing that. But it's more than just getting that story out there. How are we going to build this repository that we're talking about to document and share the diversity and rich stories of Muslims and their contributions to world civilization? Is to go out and to collect these, to go to different cities. And we're going to start, say, in the United States and start collecting. We go to different cities, bring people together, share their photographs of their parents or grandparents who had migrated here, to bring memorabilia that they have so that we can document it, take pictures and that we can then digitize and create part of this repository. But that process itself is actually an emboldening and strengthening process, that it's connecting our story, the past and the present together. So the Sir Syed, in a sense, the program is multiple, right? One is to tell a story and to get it out there to counter narratives, but the other is to strengthen our own sense of belonging as Americans through this history telling, through recollecting the experiences of my grandparents and or great grandparents in some cases, or my parents, or my own story as a child when I came here, or as a student when I migrated, and what I went through. and recognizing that that's an important story. There's a history here. It's not just a personal story, right? But it's a story of us as a community and our place and thus strengthening and belonging.
Okay, so let me go back a little. The Sir Syed Memorial Endowment Digital Legacy Project is part of a large center that we have, the Center of Muslim Experience in the United States. Now here, United States does not mean a singular kind of nation. We're talking about diversity of people who have come to United States and who are also connected beyond United States to people back home. So United States is just like a prism. Think of it as a prism through which we are looking at Muslims inside and Muslims outside. The Sir Syed Legacy Project is that kind of bridge, the connecting bridge, so that we can connect the public and the academia here with the public and academia outside, right? So we brought, our project is named after Sir Syed, namesake, because he was the one who gave us this vision that in moments of crisis, in moments of, when the world doesn't look so nice in a way, it looks bleak, as you're saying. I'm very optimistic. I take Sir Syed's view. Start planning. Start doing something that will empower you. And for that, you need education. And for that, education has to be shared knowledge. It is not just for me as an individual. It has to be shared, right? I've taken all these ideas from Sir Syed, and hence it is called the Sir Syed Legacy Project. We also bring Sir Syed in a way to an international platform, because people do not know about Sir Syed here. I can tell you this much. Very few people know. And so when you tell them that Sir Syed was a modernist thinker who brought education to a very depressed community in India in the 19th century, today, in the 21st century, we take this idea, we move beyond this depression, and we sort of take Sir Syed's idea of building something, a building institution, and through that process, Sir Syed becomes a guide, and we take Sir Syed's guidance in order to build this repository. This repository is a digital. This is digital because we don't want it to be like some kind of a museum stuck in some corner in a fixed place where people have to go to that place to see it. We will go to people. Okay. We take our knowledge and we take what we have collected to people and say, this is your history, this is your legacy. Become part of it, share it more with other people. So it's we have a 5-year plan. We have started. Inshallah, we are going to start it from this year. The initial process is to do the, kind of the foundational work, is to find the right people who can help us with the collection, what Chad was telling, to go out and do all this work, to get the right photographers, to get the right technique, the people with right technology, and to find the people who can give us initial seed money to start the work so that we can do our first prototype public exhibit. We already have a name for it. We want to do a first exhibit on Muslims in contribution to medicine. Okay, because Muslims have a very long, and I also learned a little from your program, Mujib, that you brought the naturopathy program, Unani medicine, kind of different. So there is Muslim have a lot of contribution, and it is contribution that had also showed connection. Unani is connected with the Greek ideas, right? Yes. Naturopathic medicine is also connected to Ayurveda and kind of Indic ways. So Muslim and medicine become a very good way of sort of showing these connections. Right. It's not just about Muslims, it's about also the interactions with a variety of different groups. So that's the first prototype exhibit that we would like to do in the first year after we have made the initial collection with the help of the right technical professional staff and with the little bit of money that we can generate. And also we would like to create an advisory council who can help us develop this further. So then we have a plan for the second, third, fourth year. Likewise, to come up with different digital exhibits, increase the collection, increase the artifacts, come up with lesson plans for schools, like K-12 kind of things. As you're saying, new people should know, the youth should know about all of this. So we have made a plan of how we will reach different museums, libraries, schools, and others in order to now put it beyond the university to that of newer audience, and not keep it confined to America, but take it globally. India, as you said, maybe UAE, where they also follow the CBSE system, where they can also benefit from learning. Yeah. We'd like to take it to UK. We've been already talking to some people who do work on British Muslims. So we will make our digital things accessible to everybody so that they can benefit from it. And I'm sure and I'm hoping that as people will see this, they will say, we have something also that we want you to add in your archival collection. This is my story. This is my family's memorabilia. And we will put it. It's not like we'll take your stuff. We will just make digital copies of it, and we will put it so anybody, whether you are a scholar or whether you are just a lay person, public audience, you can have an immersive experience by going to this digital repository. And Sir Syed becomes the person who guides you. It's not us. It's Sir Syed who will basically walk you through this
So
process.
what I understand, Yasmin Apa, it doesn't involve much of infrastructure. It would be yes. And do you have a synopsis which we can yani, we can approach, and we can have a bird's eye view about the whole concept? Is it already developed, or it's in a very
Yes, it
preliminary?
is developed. We don't need infrastructure, you said. It is in the university, ASU, our center, the Center of Muslim Experience, is a
Yes,
university center. We
yes.
are the first center in America that is actually documenting the stories of Muslims. It is focused only on Muslim experience. Who are these people? Where have they come from? Why have they come here? What do they contribute? It is the Muslim studies, let's put it this way, in America, right? So this is the first university center that is doing it from the point of view of human beings. We are not doing religion. We are just doing who are we as people and how do we contribute. So this is a university center. The legacy project is inside that center, but it is the flagship project that we will be doing on, because this is a very long-term kind of plan that we have, and then it has to become self-sustaining, right? Because this is, as Chad mentioned, this is a project that gives us ownership of the narrative. Muslims own this narrative. This is a project of ownership, so that people don't construct us how they want to construct us. We construct, we tell who we are. You
Correct.
may accept or reject it, but this is our point of view, right? So yes, there is no necessary infrastructure for the project itself. It's digital. We have a long proposal, and we have a proposal at a glance kind. And I'll be very, very happy to share both versions of it to you if you
Please
want to
do.
read the 10-page proposal and
Yes,
the legacy project at a glance in a 1 or 2
absolutely. I would
pages
love
that
to,
you
and
can see.
I would rather share it with as many people as possible. And it's a very noble concept, and I really wish and desire that it achieves the status which you are aiming at, inshallah.
Inshallah, we
Thank
will lay the
you.
groundwork. Inshallah, there'll be people after us.
Yes,
Like in Aligarh, we have, it keeps on growing. It's not a
yes,
static thing.
yes.
It keeps on growing, and inshallah, people with new ideas, new leadership will
Can
keep
come
building
in.
it
Inshallah.
and
Yes.
keeping it and preserve it for the future.
Yes, for sure. Yes. Yasmin Apa, now it's been wonderful discussion, and very academic and very nostalgic as well, remembering. So finally, I would close on a very, very special note. Like, you have been associated and deeply involved in student life at AMU, from leading students' union to debating and drama. And you still share a very strong emotional bond with the university, and your project is definitely exemplifies your commitment. So now I think we have already discussed what makes Aligarh so special to you and to Chad as well. But if you were to single out something very, very special which you think contributes to your memories about Aligarh, what would it be?
Mujib, that is the hardest question. Of all the questions you have asked me, this is the hardest. Aligarh is a continuous love for me. How do you separate when you love something so much? Do you say, I like the eyes, or I like the forehead, I like the, it's so
In
total,
totality,
right?
it's in
It's a
totality.
totality. It's a totality. I
Yes.
can't find say that this was the most dramatic or the most memorable incident that happened that suddenly I became aware that I am an Aligarian. No, it was a slow process, and I cannot tell. But if I I remember everything. I can tell you I remember everything. But there's one kind of stuff that I remember as my seniors. There are two kinds of seniors that we had in Aligarh. One was the hall seniors, right? Who would first rag you and try, and sort of make you feel but they are the ones who take care of you and they
So,
love you.
yes.
And the other seniors are the ones who work for us, these bhais and babas, right? And the seniors, the women seniors, I remember there were a couple of them. One was Sayeeda Apa, and she always knew that we're not used to eating just dal roti and some sabzi, and so she was very kind. And so around 10 o'clock, we were not allowed to keep in the room heaters, you see,
Yes.
to cook. But then everybody will still, bring in these little induction heaters, and at around 10 o'clock or so, she'll make tehri. And then she will ask us to come, and she used to save her butter from the morning breakfast time
That
to make
small
tehri
that
for us.
small chunk, that small
Small chunk of butter, and she'd go around asking others if they had butter from the morning breakfast, matri ke saath, and
yeah,
would make tehri and feed us because we are hungry,
yes,
right?
yeah,
That's like a senior who really like almost like she was only 2 years my senior, and she was like a mother figure who took care. How can you forget a person like that who
true,
saved her butter to give
true.
you tehri at 10 o'clock at night? And then there was a Baba. I still remember him so fondly, but in Wahidia hostel. Baba used to come as a night chowkidar, and Baba would bring two kebabs and two rotis that his daughter-in-law would pack for him for dinner.
Hmm.
And again, at around 10 o'clock or so, 9 o'clock, and the Wahidia Hall, if you may not know, Wahidia Hall had a big iron gate that used to be closed after 8 o'clock. So you can't go out of Wahidia
Yes,
Hostel anymore,
yes,
right?
yeah.
New hostel and others, they were open. So, the Tehri story I can tell you is a new hostel story, right?
Mm.
But Wahidia, I was 1 year, 2 years I was in Wahidia. Wahidia is locked up, so you're hungry. Baba is moving around. And then you tell Baba, where can we get some food? We're very hungry. It's 8, 10 o'clock at night. We have to still study till 12 o'clock. Baba would take out from his little pouch his two kebabs and his two rotis and give it to us. That was his
Wow.
dinner. And this man probably, I don't know how much he made, 100 rupees or something. And those days were very cheap, right? We paid only
Yes,
108 rupees to go to Aligarh to stay in Abdullah Hall.
yes,
So it per month, can you believe it? 108 rupees for to be a boarder in Abdullah Hall. And when I graduated or when I finished, it was 215 rupees in a matter of 6 years, hardly anything, right? So
yeah,
in that small amount of money, it was not possible people feed people biryani. So they gave us dal roti and chawal or whatever. And Baba used to feel, I will never forget those people who took care of a human need called hunger when
yeah,
they were themselves hungry people.
yes, yeah,
Baba was a very poor person. He used to be probably physically hungry most of the time,
yeah,
but he shared his meal with us.
yes,
And Sayeeda Apa, who was just 2 years our senior, was probably as hungry as we were. And she would give the tehri to us.
yes,
So to understand, it was not just a hunger of the physical hunger, it was an emotional hunger that they fed you, right? And that connection I will never forget. They
absolutely,
didn't just feed us your stomach, they fed your mind and your heart. And
yes,
how can you forget that?
absolutely. And this is what makes our emotional attachment to our alma mater so special, so dear to us, and that grows stronger as we age, I believe.
Yes, yes,
Yes,
I agree with you.
yes,
And one thing that Aligarh does not fade, despite the fact that the institution may have changed a little, whatever, the new buildings, it's getting a little crowded, this, that, other. Each person seems to have a very special relationship with that place whenever they arrive there.
yes,
They may be now crowded in Abdullah Hall compared to when we lived. But I can tell you, even today's students who are graduating from Abdullah Hall will say, I love the place because of this reason,
true,
right? Their reasons may be different,
true.
but it does not fade. It's a different kind. And so I said the ruh of Sir Syed lurks there and makes people feel you belong here.
There's
I
something
believe so. I
different.
strongly believe so. Yes,
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
there's something different about that. I mean, if you go to the camp, I mean, it's a beautiful campus, spread out, green, etc. But there are a lot of university campuses that have similar
yes,
nice, beautiful campuses, right?
yes,
There are a
yes,
lot of wonderful professors there, but there are a lot of wonderful professors at other universities too. So
yes,
what is it
yes,
about AMU that creates this one commitment to the
Yes.
institution,
Yes.
to the sense of family. I mean, as an outsider, first thing I recognized for 3 years, right? First thing, two Aligs meet, right? What
Yes.
years were you there? What hall did you stay in,
Yes.
right? And then you create this commonality in this relationship. Even if you're 20 years apart, you still
Absolutely.
have, there's something common, right? And
Yes.
you find that commonness and connect. So
Yes.
other universities, I mean, I know when Sir Syed was creating his vision, he was thinking of Oxford and Cambridge, and then in the United States we have Harvard. These institutions are uncomparable in the
True.
ways in which they create that family.
True.
Those institutions were created to protect the interests of the privileged,
Yes.
right? It
Yeah.
was a particular class of people that created those institutions, that went to those institutions, whose children went to those institutions. It reproduced an upper class mindset in education. It wasn't education for all.
True.
AMU is very different, right?
Exactly.
And somehow that gets imbibed into everybody who goes there. And
Yes.
even if you're just a visitor like myself, a complete outsider, I didn't study there. I've only been there a week at a time, here or there, doing some workshops, interacting with people. Yet something in the water, something in the dal, I don't know what it is. Something the
Something.
matri, it's the matri, I don't know, but
But
it draws you in, right? And it creates this sense of responsibility and this commitment to this institution, to the people who went there. The way we're treated wherever we go by
Yeah.
Aligs. I mean, it's mind-boggling to me
Yep.
that people go out of their way. We were just in Houston in the fall, actually discussing some of these ideas of the Sir Syed project and sort of launching it there. Every morning in the hotel that provided breakfast to us, we had two Aligs come bring homemade breakfast because who could eat this hotel food? And so they brought us parathas and eggs
And
and
kebab and chai.
chole and chai.
Yes.
Where else would you get that? Who else would do that for
Absolutely.
strangers, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Except we weren't
Parvez,
strangers, we're actually family, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's the power of Aligarh, right?
Absolutely.
Ji, my friend Parvez Saleh,
Mm.
he and I were in the history department for 1 year together. He was there, and he and I were tutorial classmates. And Parvez brings all the food from his home. Each meal comes from Parvez's homes,
Mhm.
from chai till dinner. Every meal Parvez brings himself to feed me.
Wow.
He said, Yasmin, you should not be. Ghar se aayenge khana. You are my sister. You are going to eat what I am. And he'll bring it and he'll pour even a cup of tea for me. It means,
This
these
is
are
beautiful.
things that
This is
it's so
beautiful,
lovely.
and let me share the concept behind this program, Yasmin Apa. I've always been this is my take, and this is my way of paying back. You know, I know where I stand if I remove this institution from my life. This is the tagline or the bottom line. So this is how I'm trying to pay back, and
And you're paying forward because you're bringing everybody together.
Yep.
This is amazing because your program is one way of our Aligarians now to know who we are and where we are and what we are doing. As I said in the beginning,
Absolutely.
it is not just the success stories, it is this connection story.
Exactly. And
know?
had it not been this program, I wouldn't have even thought of. I got connected with Shahir Bhai, and then he spoke about you, and then you wrote an email about one of my programs, and this is how we connected. And this is so beautifully scripted. And so, Yasmin and Chad.
And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys, inshallah, if we come to Middle East and stop by in Kuwait at some point.
I'd love to meet you guys, inshallah. So thank you, Yasmin Apa. I wish we could go on and on, but I think it's been fairly long already.
Yes.
So
you've stuck down a lot.
A little more than your half hour.
Yes, and lots of duas for you, and make dua for me also, and for our institution and the mission you are working for. Usme aapko kamyabi de, and thank you again. Wonderful having you in my program, and looking forward to meeting you soon, inshallah. Thank you, and Khuda Hafiz.
Shukriya. You have given us such a privilege and such an honor, Mujib. I really thank you. And I hope we will see you in person someday, inshallah, and meet a lot of Aligs in Kuwait and
Inshallah,
elsewhere in your
inshallah,
neighborhood.
inshallah, fingers crossed, inshallah.